George, you started streaming early, right in the middle of my breakfast.
I certainly did. So yeah, hi. Hello, if you're on Facebook, we are streaming live and the meeting will start in about 2 minutes.
Gives everybody just enough time to grab a refill on their coffee before joining us at 1 million cups. And if you're not drinking our sponsored coffee from the Muddy Dog Roasting Company, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but it's what's in my cup every morning. So, and I know this isn't supposed to be a pitch thing. It's just that I find it to be delicious. So.
Hey, sponsors have special treatment, right?
Oh, well, normally we just mention them. We don't do the
I
full,
think that
like backing and endorsement.
I think we should. I think we should talk about Dave and Wise Insights as well as a sponsor.
I don't think that was the point I was on there.
No, that's the point I was on.
Yeah.
I think it's very apt.
Yes, and he is very wise and does in fact
he is wise.
Insights.
Hilariously, that's actually the anti of the name, the anti of the story of the name. That we
I would love to hear that someday, though.
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. All right, 9 o'clock. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the RTP chapter of 1 Million Cups. Welcome to everybody who is watching us or just tuning in on Facebook. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for our intro. And here we go. Are we seeing the right thing out of curiosity?
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
Yeah, yep, look good.
So, like I said, this is the RTP chapter of 1 Million Cups. If this is your first time here or your first time watching us on Facebook, let me share with you a little bit about 1 Million Cups. 1 Million Cups is a free national program that's designed to educate, engage, and connect entrepreneurs. We are essentially the local ecosystem building arm of the Kauffman Foundation, Kauffman Foundation being a $4 billion endowment for the promotion of economic development through entrepreneurship. And there are over 160 1 Million Cups communities across the country. We're a supportive, neutral, and industry agnostic space to help entrepreneurs build on their ideas. And this is not a pitch environment. And what we mean by that is that the presenter will not be selling to the room here. The format is that we have 1 to 2 startup companies give 6-minute presentations followed by about 20 minutes of question and answer from the audience. The primary point being, what can we as a community do to help you, the presenter? And so I want you all to keep that in mind during the presentation and structure your questions to help our presenter today with the ask that they have during their presentation, because they're going to ask for some specific feedback from our community. We would love for you all to get involved. There's a number of ways you can do that. The first is you can become an organizer. If you are interested in volunteering to help build and be part of 1 Million Cups, you can connect with myself or any of the organizers that are on here today, George, David, and Carrie being 3 among them. I'm sure there are others on here, but I can only see 4 of you right at the moment. You can also apply to present. If you have a company that you think would benefit from presenting at 1 Million Cups, or you have an idea that you think you would like to explore, you can submit your application at www.1millioncups.com/RTP. You could also refer a presenter. So if you know an entrepreneur with a startup company, please invite them to come check out one of our meetings here and invite them to see if this would be a beneficial format for them to get some help and connection with the entrepreneurial community. Just let them know we're here. And then last but not least, you can attend and give feedback. And if you are viewing this on Facebook, feel free to type any questions that you have for the presenter into the chat there, as we will be monitoring that and asking questions from our Facebook community as well. I'd like to thank our community organizers. We have Carissa Johnson Sotomayor, William Clote, Tracy Ames, and Rosa Cruz. Additionally, we have our coaches, David Bates, George Stewart, and Terry Conlon. We have Dan Hepworth and myself. Also want to thank our community sponsors, Muddy Dog Roasting Company, previously mentioned, delicious coffee, Imperative Product Operations, GTI, the Global Training Initiative over at NC State, NC Idea, American Underground, previously mentioned Very Wise Insights, the Massapequa Tutor, Soto IP, and New York Life. So you'll notice that there is a small change in the presentation. We had previously had slated the Fierce Female Founders, Cindy Foy, but we had a last minute change of plans. And so today we are very, very thankful that Mr. Jonathan Gans from Kahana is presenting, and he's going to share with us what his company does. And are you ready to take it away, Jonathan?
Yep, all good to go. Thank you.
Excellent. I stopped sharing. You go ahead and take the wheel.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to speak with everyone today. So is everyone able to see my screen? Cool. Okay. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about Kahana. And so before we start, just wanted to kind of say that the research triangle definitely near and dear to my heart. I'm actually a very recent Duke grad, class of 2018, and one of my co-founders is actually my freshman year roommate at Duke. And so we had always kind of wanted to start something together. And so it's an honor to be back and kind of get a chance to talk to you about Kahana. And so our asks for today, there are a couple of topics that we could really use your help on. And so the first is, if you could build one workspace in your lifetime, what topic would you choose? And I'll explain what a workspace is, of course, as we presentation. That's a part of our product. And the second is, what's the growth marketing hack ever heard, especially in relation to kind of where we're currently at? And I'll, of course, explain that to you. So those are two things that we could really use your help with. So I'll now get into Kahana. So the problem we're solving for is that is tedious, consuming. It's something that we noticed at Duke all throughout, and something that kind of founded the idea in our head that we wanted to start something around this space. Ultimately, what we noticed is that students and other folks are dealing with a ton of information, and that information processing is overwhelming. There's a bunch of different tabs on your computer. You might have internet tabs, you have windows and files floating around in the text editor, and you're kind of trying to bounce around between all of these different files when you're trying to get work done and to synthesize information. And ultimately what happens is you spend more time actually looking for that information than being able to use it and kind of conduct your work on a day-to-day basis. And the current technology landscape is just not equipped to handle that. And it's not a problem that, we felt wasn't really being solved. So we decided to go ahead and solve it. And our solution to that was with Kahana, with this minimalist screen workspace that we've created, where you can basically collect and organize all of your resources in one place while researching and writing. So you have all of your documents there. You don't have to kind of spend time bouncing around between different places, and you're able to actually synthesize the information that you want and simultaneously write. And then the key feature that we've implemented that really puts it all together is the smart links, which you can kind of see in blue.
Jonathan, I don't know if you can hear us, but it appears that you are frozen up. All right. Let's see if we can get in touch with Jonathan and see if we can get him to reset briefly. Terry, would you be able to help us with that?
Yeah, I'm looking at his text right now.
We
There we go.
lost you there for about 2
Oh.
minutes, Jonathan. I'm sorry. Can you
Oh,
back up a
no
couple of
worries.
moments?
Yep, absolutely. Sorry about that. I didn't realize
you,
it was.
you were talking about the research links in blue, and then you cut out.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah. So was everything captured before that?
You had just started to reference the research links, and that's where you
Okay,
froze.
perfect. Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, sorry about that. So I can go back. So essentially those links, the smart links that I was attempting to explain before Zoom cut out, was that essentially allows you to link specific text that you write to a specific resource that you got the information from or that you want to pull up, so that, you know, anytime you want to pull up information, you're able to do instead of having to kind of sift through your desktop to try and find that information. So it really just allows you to connect your resources to your notes. And so that's what we kind of uncovered as we were starting to build this, and as we started to get users, is that these workspaces are actually unique repositories of information and ways of digesting information, because not only are you able to organize the resources and files that you want with your notes for yourself, you actually look at a workspace and show someone else the workspace, we found that it was very easy for people to look at it and kind of understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to demonstrate, as opposed to, for example, let's say a Google Doc where you can really only scroll up and down and you just get over information, and you can only really consume it one way, and it kind of gets too long and too tough to really understand what's going on if it's more than a couple of pages. Whereas this allows you to have a bunch of different files and links to those files, as well as multiple notes that you're able to create. And so you're really able to block it up into nice chunks. And so that's really what we're now focusing on, kind of building off of, is the fact that these are unique repositories of information. And we've already discovered and have recently implemented the ability to actually share these workspaces. So our original user base was kind of asking to be able to share workspaces that they were creating, because they were so helpful for them, their own being in their own work, that they wanted to be able to share with others. And you can see on the right hand side that this is actually a live picture of one of our users sharing a workspace that she created with her classmates in a master's class. And she was really excited about the opportunity to be able to do that we've now recently implemented. And that's kind of going back to that first question. I mentioned at the beginning, what workspace would you want to see, or what workspace do you think would be helpful? That's kind of what we're starting to explore now, is how to really make these workspaces that could be helpful for other people, because you don't have to use the product to be a workspace. Anyone can view it if it's shared. And so we're really starting to explore how to use that to kind of get the product out there and get more users. And ultimately, what we're trying to create is really an open source research hub where people are able to go into Kahana and create and consume workspaces on topics that they want to be educated on. So the idea would really be to, rather than kind of have to, for example, go do your own research on Google and have to vet internet articles one by one and take notes on them and then kind of get started, you have this repository of well curated and vetted workspaces that people have already created, that you can kind of quickly educate yourself on a topic and then get started on your research. And so that's really where we're currently at today, and why these are the two really key questions I'd love to kind of talk to you more about and have your help with, is that we have our kind of initial user base, but we're hitting that inflection. Really want to get the product into more people's hands so that we can continue to build these helpful workspaces and kind of get more people in our network and get more people to just be creating these workspaces so that more people can consume them and kind of push that cycle forward. And so that's why these two asks are we'd love your help with. and I'd love to answer any questions as well, just about kind of other things that we're working on, where we're coming from, and would just love to have an open discussion with you all about Kahana.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. So we're going into our question and answer segment, and the format for this is that if you would like to ask a question of our presenter, please send a private message to George. Let him know that you do have a question. You don't have to tell him exactly what the question is, but you can if you want to, and he will put you in the queue. And when you are next, he will let you know that you're next. Go ahead and turn your camera on. If you are able to, make sure you unmute yourself, and George will let you know that it's your turn and you can go ahead and ask your question. If you have a brief follow-up, that's fine. But if you have more than just a quick follow-up or clarification, we ask that you respect everybody else's ability to be able to ask questions, and just save that question for another time, get it back into the queue, or wait until after our presentation, after our meeting. We'll have, about 10-15 minutes of open conversation with Jonathan after we go off Facebook. So George, do we have anybody in the queue for the first question?
Yeah, I'm just going to pass things to Dave for just a minute to talk about the asks and perhaps give us all some advice on how to help Jonathan here.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for both applying to present and for being flexible with us and stepping in here when we had a scheduling challenge. I appreciate that flexibility. One of the things that I'm curious about in your ask is the question of where's the hard part, right, for you. You've given us a good overview of the product, but what we're having a little difficulty, I think, potentially seeing is who's it for? Like, who's your primary customer? And what have you done from a marketing standpoint so far? So we can talk about growth marketing hacks, and everybody wants to find the shortcut, right? But the best advice I ever heard was from Seth Godin on this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So it'd be difficult for us to say, hey, like, here's a hack that's going to work for you. What would be really helpful is to understand. So if you could just take a minute or two to talk about your market and what you've done so far, so that we can understand what's maybe not working, and then be able to ask you more informed questions around your marketing work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. I'd be happy to talk about that. So we like to define our target customer as a quote unquote serial content creator. So it's someone who is collecting and organizing a high volume of resources to create written content. And so what's interesting about that is that it's not necessarily one specific segment of the market. It's not high school students or it's not bloggers, but it's actually a group of people who all kind of are dealing with this similar issue of information overload, all these different documents. And that is inclusive of college students, lawyers, screenwriters, bloggers, journalists, etc. And so we've kind of tried to find which group really attaches to the idea and to the product the most, and kind of just been experimenting with different places. We've kind of experimented a little bit in the college space. We found that there's sometimes friction there just because of the fact that college students aren't necessarily willing to pay for a product, even though we do have a free trial to kind of enable people to test it out and use it, but it's still there's some friction there. We have experimented a lot on Twitter. So Adam, one of my co-founders, and I, the one from Duke, we have a pretty good presence in the writing community on Twitter. And so we've been doing a lot there of kind of organic outreach and getting people to try product. And that's definitely been successful to an extent. We've been able to get people onto the platform and to try out the product and give feedback, but there's not quite as much stickiness there. We've seen that, there's a lot of people willing to try, but then, they'll log in for a couple times and then that's kind of it. And so that's something that we're dealing with too. And then, so then it's really about reaching new markets and also understanding who our power users are and kind of understanding how to double down on getting more people our power users, because we have an idea kind of the people who are using it the most and who are really excited about it.
Did you have a follow-up, Dave, or are you good?
Well, I'll always have follow-ups. I noticed there's a few things in there. What are you finding is difficult in terms of identifying the larger group of the power users, right? So like finding the people that really want the thing that you have to sell, and like why is that? What's difficult about that for you?
So what's difficult is that it kind of the people are coming from different segments. It's not necessarily, oh, you know, grad students are really latching onto this. It's, we have, for example, one grad student who is in the medicine space who really appreciates the product. We have an English literature grad student who really appreciates the product. Our co-founder is more from the kind of content marketing blogging space, and he really appreciates the product. And so like there's a few others as well, of course, but it kind of just is not really, we're not really finding that it's a specific segment of the market that appreciates it, but maybe a specific type of person. And it's a little difficult to kind of pinpoint the commonalities and underlying reasons as to why all of these people are kind of gathering around it. And we're really trying to hit that point and really understand how to identify really who the target customer is, and then kind of go from there and kind of make our kind of marketing collateral and generally our language around those types of people to attract them to the platform.
Yeah, so my recommendation to you would be to spend a little bit more time digging into some of the customer development techniques to really try to elicit from different people what the ideal persona is for who you're going after. A lot of times we do that before we build the software, but you know, like you can do it afterwards as well. The danger with that is that a lot of times we try to fit the customer development, the customer discovery work around the thing we've built instead of around the needs of the customer and who we're trying to serve. Like there's a match between what are you trying to build and who wants to buy it already versus the other way. So that would be the recommendation. If you're familiar with Eric Ree's work and Steve Blank's work, I'd recommend digging into that a little bit more.
That's definitely helpful. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on. Louise has a question.
Hey, this is Louise. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to come off mute or if. Well, thank you for the presentation, Jonathan. That was good. And I'm actually interested in it. I do a lot of medical writing, so I was like, this is kind of an interesting concept. So glad I got to join the call. My questions were more, I guess, some nuts and bolts as I was kind of thinking through your product. And I was trying to understand like the space that you create. Like, is it something you were invited to join, and like, if you join a space, how do you know like the credibility of the content?
Right. That's a fantastic question. And so for now, it's an individual space. So when you create an account, you are able to create these workspaces and you have complete control over what resources go into them and what notes are created from them. And what you alluded to with kind of the credibility of the space is actually something we're definitely looking to solve down the road, is that as we start to have more people, bring people onto the platform and create these workspaces, we want to ensure that the information that's being disseminated is good information that's really helping to educate people. And so we're planning on kind of building an open source verification system where we basically allow the people within the network to, in some way, shape, or form, vote and kind of whether the workspace is quality content, whether it's helpful or whether it's something that, you know, is not necessarily credible and shouldn't be kind of visited. And that's also kind of a product of the people who are able to join, or people who are able to join our network, and people who we are able to attract to come onto the product and to create these workspaces. And so that's something that we're actively kind of working on now and thinking about. But yeah, the workspace is not something you would be personally could create, and then you have the power to send the workspace to whoever you want. So right now it's shareable via a link, and you can turn that link on or off at any time. And so others would be able to view. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say thank you. That's good, because one of the things that I was kind of thinking through, and one of the things I do is I work in pharma, and we create content, and sometimes there's a lot of reference checking and kind of following content, and sometimes, like you said, I've got like 10 screens open. I'm like, it would be so great if I could just find one, send them the link, and say, okay, this is reference one, kind of connect it all. So again, thank you for your presentation, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks, Louise. Thank you for stepping up. Terry has a question.
Yeah, so Jonathan, one of the things that might be useful to you is to start creating use cases for your early adopters, and that would give you a sense of the people who are using your solution in a very common way, and it might also tell you what are the best market segments to attack, because the early adopters will have identified that for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that's something we want to do as well, with kind of building out our video content and YouTube channels, to be able to have to build around exactly like what you said, use cases, and kind of seeing what our early adopters are using the product for, and building out content around that to kind of reach more similar folks.
Yeah, because just using Louise as an example very briefly, if she is on a research team, I don't know how many different research teams there are in pharma in the triangle, but I'm guessing that there are hundreds. And obviously they're members of those same research teams who are from New Jersey and from Philadelphia. And part of the power of this, it seems to me, is it's or could be a highly evolved collaboration tool. So if you're able to satisfy those kinds of needs, then you can start cherry picking a bunch of people with some customer testimonials as well, if you adopt that kind of use case approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Going back to academics now, William has a question and suggestion.
Well, I mean, it's kind of along the same vein, right? It's just trying to find that audience that, can certainly utilize the tool, and then provide that feedback loop so you can improve the product. So it's really, just, have you tried, talking to, the professors that get research grants, and they might be able to have a little bit of money set aside for this type of collaboration tool, or just, academic researchers in general that run around the campuses, because again, I mean, for a very low-hanging fruit, because they do a lot of collaboration. I don't know what tools they use right now, but you can certainly, with your ties to Duke, you could probably get in there and probably get in front of some of the folks that would be willing to try out the platform.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and definitely a space that we want to explore. We've explored a little bit with some folks from Duke, and just from my understanding of the landscape, unfortunately, COVID kind of throws a wrench into how much of a budget there is available to kind of do to kind of use this on a wide scale, but definitely want to explore the potential to have possibly a pilot program where a certain class is using it. And yeah, what you said about research grants, that's absolutely a great use case that we think would benefit professors who are kind of working on those. And so definitely want to explore that further, and kind of maybe reach out to some professors. And if you or other folks on the line know of any professors working on specific projects that this might be particularly useful for. I would very much welcome any warm introductions or opportunities to speak with them and talk to them, and even just to get their feedback on kind of things that we would need to build out before it's ready for that kind of use case, or how to kind of spread it out to other folks who are working on similar projects.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, William. Really appreciate it. Dominic has a question.
One thing that I didn't see, Jonathan, is any conversation about potential competition in this market, because it seems like there are going to be collaborative workflow platforms out there, both paid and free versions, such as like you mentioned, Google Docs, and there seems to be some similarities here to maybe different types of wikis that are out there. So can you address, like who potential competition is and what is the differentiator?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's definitely other kind of tools and platforms out there that people are using to, organize their notes or kind of collaborate. So Google Docs is an example. Evernote is a kind of classic example of a note-taking app. Notion is kind of up and coming as an all-in-one workspace. And we have a few differentiating factors, I would say. The first is that split screen workspace that you saw. We actually have IP pending around that workspace that will hopefully be approved within the coming month. We filed for track 1 in December, and we had a chance to speak with the examiner who went over it, and he mentioned that just a few kind of semantics changes would ensure that it would be good to go. And so we're looking forward to having that in. Their key differentiator is the fact that a lot of these platforms are actually kind of trying to add too much and kind of too many different features, whereas we take a minimalist approach of really being rigorous around adding only features that are truly necessary and not overwhelming the user with different kinds of things that they can do, and really designing it around the issue, not necessarily adding all these features that could seem cool or seem exciting, but that ultimately are distracting and actually taking away from the ability to conduct work. And so we're really focusing on, at all times, enhancing creative flow and really making sure that the user is able to synthesize information and carry out their work as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And so that rigorous approach and focus on creative flow, minimalist approach is really what separates us from some of these other forms that are out there. And another final key differentiator is the fact that we're focused on really the full life cycle of collecting, organizing, and creating. There's a lot of courses out there that kind of do one or two of those. So for example, Evernote is a great place to collect and organize, but then creating, it really becomes one of the several different things that you're juggling between on your computer and bouncing around between, so it doesn't really help you with the create. But the fact that with Kahana you have truly everything that you need to work in one space allows you to also collect, organize, and then ultimately create your work. And so you're able to just eliminate the distractions and do all of what you need to do without having to use multiple screens or bounce other windows and tabs.
So Jonathan, I've got a question I'd like to throw out, and then we'll go to Dave.
Yep.
And my question really concerns to pick up on where your competitive advantage is. So have you gotten any feedback from anybody outside the academic student population? Have you gotten feedback from or done any deployment to other industries or other scenarios?
Yeah, so we've definitely gotten a good deal of feedback from the writing community. So a lot of our initial use people who set up from our organic outreach on Twitter in the writing space, blogging, so mostly bloggers and authors. And that a lot of feedback we've heard is is the fact that it's so simple to use and kind of clean UI UX, and that just kind of fact that you can have everything in one space. Those are kind of the big things that have been thrown out there in terms of the positives of why they like it and why they would want to use it.
So there are only two of you in the business, right?
So it's so there's a third technical co-founder.
Okay.
So my freshman year roommate.
Yeah, you've got 3 people in the business, so you can't realistically go after the whole world. So my suggestion would be, if you can find a sweet spot where a beachhead where you are just the only game in town or the best game in town, and focus on that beachhead, that one industry, that one application, and really go after that rather than trying to cover the entire waterfront. I think just in terms of scalability and focus, if you lose focus on that market and you try to appeal to everybody like a Google, you're not going to have the resources to do it. So my suggestion is pick one and go all out for that one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely couldn't agree more with that. And that's kind of, what the position we're in, of trying to really hone in on that thought, and why we're kind of trying to sprinkle it out to different places who have the pain point, but really understand the one who need it, who need the product, as opposed to kind of a nice to have. And so once we kind of hit that sweet spot, we're absolutely planning on kind of doubling down and just building it for them, basically.
Okay, good. Dave's got a suggestion.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a follow-up, actually. I've heard a couple of things, and I'd like to hear from you. During your presentation, you described a utility for ease of collection of content, organization of content, retrieval of content, and creation. But during the Q&A, you've talked about collaboration. And those are 2 pretty different things. So, and they're tied clearly. But, if you think about a company like Microsoft with SharePoint, that is their whole thing. Google, their whole thing, right? You work in it. Here's all your Google Docs. And I realize that it's not simple, but I'm still struggling to see what your positioning is. It's really expensive Hershey's chocolate, right? Like, what that is. It's not Hershey's, but it's accessible, right? So your positioning matrix and axis is unclear to me, and I think it would be worthwhile to spend some time there. The observation is every one of those other platforms that we've talked about in your competitive space that you've talked about as being bloated and difficult. None of those people started out to make a bloated piece of software. But what they did was they said, well, what do you need it to do? Sure, we'll add that, because every one of those people that they talked to needed that thing to streamline and make their experience super, unique for them and fast for them. So when you go out and you start asking people, what do you need? And then you build it in, you actually inculcate the practice of building bloat from the beginning. So if one of the axes that you have is minimalist UI, minimalist UX, then you have to get really skilled at saying no to people, and really skilled at saying yes to the people that George is talking about, right? Which is who really, really, really can you not cover up the ball with? So it really, my recommendation to you here is to look at that positioning axis really, really, really carefully.
No, that definitely, and I agree. That's what you kind of described there is exactly what our optimal and ideal situation would be, is to get to that point where we know that we don't want to please everyone, because if everyone's your customer, no one's yours, as the old saying goes. So we definitely want to make sure that we're saying we're saying yes to the right people, and able to say no to people who aren't necessarily going to use the product. And that's really a part of our philosophy, is building for not everyone, but building for the right customer, and making sure that we're pushing the product forward for them, and so that we're able to maintain that minimalist UX UI.
Just really quick follow-up to that, and it ties back to the thing I was mentioning earlier with Eric Ries and Steve Blank. If you're having trouble finding those people, it's sometimes worthwhile to take a step back and ask, what's the thing you want to build? And then go find out if you can find those people, instead of trying to go and ask everybody, because everybody has an opinion. They're like noses, everybody's got one, right? So if you ask somebody, would you like this? They're going to say yes if you'll make it do that. If you can't figure that out, step back and ask what it is that you actually want to build.
Yep. No, thank you. That's very helpful.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Brittany, you had a hand up. Did you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to connect with Dave and say, absolutely. I think that's a unique thing coming from a company that our active vetting, we vet most of our customers out of our scale because we only offer one solution. It's a very streamlined solution. So it was more so a comment just saying, I think there is a ton of value in that model. It's just making sure to hone in your demographic and only target those people that you want, whether it's an industry, whether it's a type of person, early adopter, whatever that be, because those, I think those are the most valuable long-term relationship. And in a platform like yours where retention is key, I think it's something that is very strategic from experiencing this type of platform before personally. I think it does get convoluted, and it does, you sometimes, the more platform, the more that we add to the platform, it just becomes overwhelming. You think of Android versus iPhone user. Sure, the Android has the capabilities, but if you can't access it 90% of the time. So I was just expanding on Dave's comments.
No, thank you. That's very, very helpful feedback and context.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Brittany. And thanks to everybody who's asked the question. We're going to turn it over to Dominic, who has one final question, and then a wrap up. But a reminder, if you would like to have just an informal chat with Jonathan, he's going to stick around after the end of the formal meeting for a little coffee pop chat.
All right. Well, I always seem to bring it around to this, which is the ultimate question of business. How do you make money? So, what is your potential market size? What is what you think could be attainable market for the company? And, what are your short-term, what is your short-term and then your long-term strategy for monetization?
Yeah. So I can start with the short-term, long-term monetization strategy. So our short-term monetization strategy was to essentially, so we went live with the product at the end of July, based on having it be a one-time payment of $34.50, just to essentially prove out and demonstrate, to kind of experiment to see if we could elicit payment for the state that the product is in right now, because of course it's still MVP and we wanted to just get it out as quickly as possible. And we were fortunately able to secure some payments there, which we were very excited about. But once we got those, we were seeing a clear block in being able to expand our user base, because of course, if there's a paywall immediately without even having a chance to try it for free, it's just tough to scale rapidly. And so we opted to implement a free trial which went live at the end of August. So now there is a free trial for the product, and definitely more people have started to sign up, and we've just started to kind of see our some of the revenue trickle in from those free trial users, which is great. And so we've already been able to generate a little revenue, which we're very excited about. And now we're really focusing on wrapping up the development of this kind of version, we call it version 1 prototype. And we're going to be focusing on going into working on version 2, which we will look to make a more full-fledged production level product, which will have a freemium model. So we'll have, but based on that, we've been closely tracking on certain features that people are using the most frequently, kind of take a Zoom approach to basically limiting or providing essentially full functionality in the free version, but having that limiting factor that kind of gets people to convert to paying for the premium service. So that's really where that's kind of the direction that we're headed in that aspect. And then from an attainable market standpoint, we have definitely done research there. We identified the productivity software space as our overall market, which is right now primarily dominated by Microsoft, and then Google is primarily dominated by Microsoft and Google, but really primarily dominated by Microsoft. Microsoft Office has just been in this space for such a long time, and G Suite is kind of struggling to keep up. And actually kind of where we see our product fit in as kind of a competitive advantage to one of those Office suites, as something that really enables people who have one of those, who either use kind of G Suite or Microsoft Office, to connect all of their resources together and be able to do content creation. And so that's kind of where we see our product fitting into that space.
Okay. I'm just going to follow up real quick. That is completely different than our conversation earlier in identifying who your competitors were, because you talked about what was that, Evernote, what is it, Notion, I think that
yeah, Notion,
what you mentioned, so you're competing against a number of different things, but now it appears it's primarily the full Office suites, which is a complete, that's a completely different type of competition.
Right. Well, so I maybe I can clarify. We're definitely not competing in that space. We want to we see ourselves, that would be a great landing spot. That's kind of in terms of when we're talking about the attainable market, that's where we would like to kind of fit into. But from a space, of course, the competitors are just these other apps and tools that people are using.
You're talking about the two biggest beasts you could try to slay. So, David's advice about establishing that beachhead is going to be even more critical to the success of what you're trying to do, because you're not going to be able to, they'll just spend you into the ground in order to eliminate the competition in this particular space. So you've got to kind of fly under the radar as you build your customer base. As far as monetizing this idea, I think you may be missing a large opportunity, and I think to want to suggest this to you is that not only can you monetize the utilization of the platform itself for the research, but you can also potentially monetize access to the research itself. So if people are wanting to find a place, to have quick access to, qualified information that's been vetted, maybe you have a bit of a paywall there as well, where accounts that are or pages that are available, right, in order to you can get a free trial of that, but then in order to get access to that permanently, there's maybe a monthly, or you could do both a monthly or a permanent subscription model to that access as well. So it would give you two different streams of revenue going on, one for the content creators and one for the content consumers.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And that's something that we're kind of planning on potentially into the freemium model. I definitely agree that it could be kind of two separate things, perhaps something like Medium, where Medium, you can access 3 free articles a month, but otherwise you have to pay to have unlimited access. Like, that is definitely something we could base the kind of research and actual content off of.
Gotcha. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up with that, and we do have an opportunity for some community announcements. Thank you, Jonathan. If you have any announcements that you'd like to make to the community of any events that you have coming up, or if feedback or new resources that you've discovered in the past week that you'd like to share with the community or community of entrepreneurs, please ping George, let him know you have a community announcement, and we will give you the opportunity to share that. George, do you have anybody who's got an announcement?
Not yet, Dominic, but I bet you've got an event coming up.
Oh my goodness, I always have an event coming up, don't I? There's an event next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. It is a virtual casual business networking event. It is the Rockstar Connect North Carolina mixer that I do host, and that is from 7 till usually about 9 o'clock in the evening. So everybody is welcome to that. I will find and share the link to that here in a moment. And yeah, I don't have any other announcements this week other than, of course, to reiterate our asks at 1 Million Cups, that if you would like to become involved and be an organizer, get in contact with one of our current organizers. If you would like to present, you can go to our website, which is www.1millioncups.com/RTP. Click the button that says apply to present. Or if you know somebody who is an entrepreneur who may benefit from presenting at 1 Million Cups, please let them know that we're here and let them know how they can apply to present. Anybody else have anything they'd like to announce? Excellent. Well, to the folks who showed up for the first time today, I would like to say thank you. We appreciate you being here. Louise, I'm not sure if you've been here before, but I don't think I've heard your voice before. So thank you for participating and being here. We appreciate it. And thanks to everybody else. We'll see you next Wednesday.